They tell you fame is light, cameras, applause, devotion. But if you look closely, really look, you'll see it's not light that surrounds them, it's fire. And fire doesn't just illuminate, it consumes. Here's the truth most people can't handle. Celebrity isn't a gift, it's a battlefield. Every smile, every interview, every relatable post is part of a calculated war for power, influence, and survival. What we call fame is just a modern arena for the oldest human game, the game Machiavelli understood better than anyone, the manipulation of perception. 500 years ago, in the courts of Florence, Niccolo Machiavelli dissected power with the precision of a surgeon. He saw through the illusions of morality and virtue, and he understood something that most still refuse to accept. The world doesn't reward the good, it rewards the strategy. And the same cold logic that ruled the palaces of Renaissance princes now rules the glowing screens of the digital elite. Scroll through any platform and you'll see it. The faces of influence, the authentic moments carefully staged, the chaos perfectly choreographed. What looks spontaneous is engineered. What looks vulnerable is rehearsed. What looks like a fall from grace is often a controlled demolition, a sacrifice made to reignite attention. Machiavelli once wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But in our time, fear and love have merged into one addictive currency, attention. And attention, as any modern manipulator knows, is the most powerful form of control. Because when you control what people look at, you control what they think. And when you control what they think, you control who they become. Think about it. Our modern princes aren't kings or generals. They're celebrities. Their armies are followers. Their weapons, emotion, scandal, confession. They move public opinion with a tweet, rewrite cultural norms with a headline, destroy reputations with silence. And the masses, believing they're free, offer themselves up as loyal subjects. Machiavelli would have recognized this instantly. He warned that the ruler must appear virtuous while secretly being ruthless. That's not cynicism, that's survival. In a world where every eye is watching, the one who controls the narrative controls the throne. Today's celebrities aren't just entertainers, they're tacticians of image warfare. Look at the redemption arc, one of the most Machiavellian inventions of modern culture. The scandal breaks, the public outrage burns hot, and then like clockwork, the confessional interview, the I've changed monologue, the charity appearance. The sinner becomes saint again, and the crowd weeps with relief. It feels real, it feels redemptive, but underneath it's strategy, a controlled restoration of power. Machiavelli called this simulation and dissimulation, the art of showing what is necessary while concealing what is true. Every modern PR team uses it instinctively, because the truth doesn't matter, only the perception of truth does. Take a moment to notice how celebrity culture mirrors politics. Both thrive on spectacle, both rely on the manipulation of hope and fear, both feed on public emotion, and both collapse when the illusion cracks. When Machiavelli advised the prince to sometimes commit evil for the sake of stability, he wasn't endorsing cruelty. He was revealing reality. He saw that humans crave security more than virtue, and that appearances of strength, no matter how false, maintain order better than honesty ever could. That same principle rules the celebrity sphere today. When a pop icon falls from grace, the handlers don't rush to prove innocence. They rush to control the frame. They know the public's memory is short, but its hunger for drama is endless. Turn the fall into a story, the story into sympathy, the sympathy into renewed loyalty, and the empire rises again. Here's what most people miss. The modern influencer doesn't sell products, they sell emotion. They sell identity. They offer the illusion of intimacy to millions who crave significance. It's not connection, it's containment. Because when you attach your emotions to a public figure, you've handed them a piece of your autonomy. Machiavelli would have smiled at this. He understood that the clever ruler doesn't rule through force, but through desire. Men are governed by the love of gain, he said, and in our world, gain is no longer gold. It's visibility, status, the dopamine of being seen. And that's the cruel brilliance of the system. Everyone is invited to play, but only a few ever win. Social media sold the fantasy that anyone can become a celebrity, but Machiavelli would have told you the truth. Visibility without strategy is vulnerability. When you expose yourself without understanding the game, you become a pawn in someone else's narrative. Look at the way controversy works now. Outrage is engineered like currency. One scandal equals 1 week of relevance. One feud equals millions of impressions. In a Machiavellian sense, this is perfect. Conflict is control. Division is domination. While the crowd argues, the architect rises. Remember his warning: the vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar. Brutal, yes, but watch how accurate it is. The crowd doesn't think, it reacts. It doesn't reason, it feels. And every influencer, every media strategist, every politician who thrives today understands that manipulating feeling is far more effective than appealing to thought. But let's go deeper. Beneath all the noise, the heart of this manipulation lies in one principle: control the frame of morality. The crowd needs villains and heroes, saints and sinners. They crave a moral story, and the one who defines what's good or evil in any given moment owns the narrative. That's why modern celebrities oscillate between virtue signaling and controversy. They must constantly reinvent their image to align with the moral winds of the time. When the crowd turns left, they turn left faster. When it turns right, they pivot effortlessly. This isn't hypocrisy, it's survival. In Machiavelli's terms, a prince must learn how not to be good and to use that knowledge or not according to necessity. Necessity, that's the word. The moral code of power is not right or wrong, it's what is required. Think about political leaders who mastered this art. Napoleon understood the theater of image. He made himself not just emperor, but legend. Every gesture, every uniform, every myth was weaponized. Or look at modern populists who understand television better than policy. They don't need to win debates, they need to dominate airtime. Machiavelli would have admired their instinct, because in politics, as in fame, it's not truth that matters. It's perception, repetition, and timing. Now here's where things get darker. When you study Machiavelli's principles through the lens of modern psychology, you realize how precisely he anticipated manipulation tactics now taught in persuasion seminars and intelligence agencies. Anchoring, emotional mirroring, scarcity, controlled vulnerability, all modern labels for ancient instincts. He knew the human mind bends under two forces, fear and desire. Create fear of loss, then offer the illusion of salvation, and people will give you everything. This is why celebrity apologies, political speeches, and advertising all sound the same. They strike the fear of exclusion, then offer belonging as redemption. It's not coincidence, it's engineering. And yet the brilliance of Machiavelli's philosophy isn't that it teaches deception, it's that it reveals it. He held up a mirror to human nature and said, "This is who we are when no one's watching." The manipulators didn't invent the game, they just stopped pretending not to play it. We live in a world where visibility equals validation, and the human soul has become a marketplace of attention. The question is who's manipulating, it's who isn't. And maybe that's the most dangerous part, because when manipulation becomes the air we breathe, authenticity stops being real, it becomes just another performance. Every act of honesty, every confession, every raw moment is filtered through the question, how will this be perceived? We live inside a mirror maze of impression. The more we look for truth, the more reflections we find. And at the center, the truth itself begins to disappear. That's the final stage of Machiavellian mastery, not just to deceive others, but to build a world where deception feels like truth. Look at the modern influencer economy. The faces change, the tactics don't. A celebrity launches a charity campaign after a scandal. A politician posts family photos after a corruption charge. A corporation suddenly cares about mental health the week their products are accused of causing it. It's not coincidence, it's orchestration. Because every scandal creates two markets, one for outrage and one for redemption, and both are profitable. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is like a river, uncontrollable, chaotic, destructive. But the wise ruler builds dams and channels to direct its force. That's what today's elites do with emotion. They don't stop the flood of public feeling. They guide it, harness it, redirect it. They build empires from chaos. And here's the twist, so do we. Every time you post, every time you curate your image, every time you delete something that felt too honest, you're playing the same game, just on a smaller scale. You're shaping perception, you're performing power, you're trying to be loved but not too loved, feared but not too feared, visible but not too exposed. The truth is, Machiavellian logic has seeped into the collective subconscious. We've internalized it. It's not just in boardrooms or behind PR desks. It's in every filtered selfie, every humble caption, every conversation where we say what's expected instead of what's real. We all wear crowns now, invisible ones, and we all play the role of ruler and subject at once. And this brings us to something darker. Machiavelli never believed in good or evil as absolutes. To him, morality was situational, an instrument of control, not a guiding force. The masses needed morality so they could be governed. The rulers needed flexibility so they could survive. That's not a justification, it's an observation of how power sustains itself. Now look at the moral codes of our time. They change by the hour. One week's hero becomes next week's villain. Public opinion swings like a pendulum, and those who thrive within it aren't those who are right, but those who adapt fastest. This is moral Darwinism, virtue as a survival mechanism. It's the reason why celebrity culture feels simultaneously righteous and hollow. On the surface, everything is about justice, inclusion, empathy. But beneath, it's about control of narrative, of identity, of social position, compassion as weapon, outrage as currency. The new Machiavellians don't wear crowns or armor. They wear vulnerability and self-awareness. They don't hide behind thrones, they hide behind authenticity. Because here's what Machiavelli understood. Once people believe you're sincere, they'll forgive almost anything. He wrote that men are so simple and so subject to present necessity that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. And that line, 5 centuries old, might as well be written for today's age of parasocial worship. People want to believe their favorite celebrity cares. They want to believe their leader understands. They want to believe the influencer is just like them. It's not stupidity, it's need. Humans crave connection, and those who control that craving control the world. So when we talk about celebrity culture, we're not really talking about individual. We're talking about an ecosystem designed to exploit psychological hunger. Fame, at its core, is an industrialized form of emotional manipulation. The same mechanisms that build a dictator's propaganda machine now build a pop star's brand. Both require a myth, both require enemies, both require the illusion of destiny, and every myth needs sacrifice. You've seen it, the celebrity meltdown, the public humiliation, the staged redemption arc, its ritual. A symbolic cleansing that allows the crowd to feel moral superiority before offering forgiveness. It's not chaos, it's choreography. Machiavelli would have recognized it instantly. He advised rulers to commit cruelty all at once, then follow it with small, gradual acts of kindness. Why? Because people forget pain but remember comfort. Once you give them relief, they'll reframe your cruelty as necessity. Sound familiar? Every time a fallen star rebrands, every time a politician returns with a new vision, every time a brand apologizes and donates a token sum, they're enacting that same principle. The cruelty is forgotten, the comfort remembered. Let's not pretend this is just about them. The masses play their role too, because deep down we need the illusion of moral order. We need to believe that our collective judgment shapes destiny. That's why cancel culture feels powerful. It gives people the illusion of control. But Machiavelli would laugh, because in reality, outrage is the easiest thing to manipulate. He'd tell you, men are more ready to offend one who desires to be loved than one who wishes to be feared. And in a digital world built on love, that means outrage has become the new form of obedience. The crowd believes it's punishing corruption, but it's just dancing to someone else's rhythm. And here's the paradox: this system cannot exist without emotional investment. Indifference would kill it. That's why everything now is designed to provoke a feeling: anger, lust, pity, admiration. Because when people feel, they follow. And when they follow, they can be directed. Every algorithm is Machiavellian at its core. It rewards outrage, punishes nuance, amplifies extremes. It doesn't care about truth, it cares about engagement. And the more polarized you are, the easier you are to control. That's how modern power operates, not by censorship, but by saturation. Not by silencing, but by overwhelming. Flood the senses until reason collapses. Then feed the chaos with a narrative that feels like clarity. And in that fog, the new princes rule not with armies, but with influence. Not with violence, but with attention. Think of the celebrities who transform their scandals into stepping stones, the leaders who turn their failures into martyrdom, the influencers who weaponize their own trauma for engagement. These are not coincidences, they're tactics. Machiavelli's art of appearing virtuous, reborn for the digital stage. And if you look closely enough, you'll see that the performance of weakness has become the new form of strength. The most powerful people today are those who can appear powerless without ever losing control. Vulnerability has become a calculated weapon, a new form of manipulation disguised as healing. This is the genius of modern persuasion. It doesn't fight you, it hugs you. It tells you you're seen, you're heard, you're understood, and then it quietly redirects your will. But don't mistake this for pessimism. Machiavelli wasn't teaching people to become monsters. He was teaching them to see monsters clearly, to see how the world really operates so they could navigate it without being devoured. He believed that those who understand power, its illusions, its manipulations, its masks, can use it consciously instead of unconsciously. And that's what this modern labyrinth demands, awareness. Because once you recognize the performance, it loses its spell. The only true antidote to manipulation is vision, the ability to see the mechanics behind emotion, the structure behind chaos. When you see the hands that pull the strings, you stop dancing for them. The tragedy is that most people don't want that kind of freedom. Real freedom demands clarity, and clarity kills comfort. It's easier to worship idols than to dissect them, easier to be entertained than to be awake. But here's the truth Machiavelli whispered beneath every page. Reality doesn't care about comfort. Power belongs to those who see things as they are, not as they wish them to be. So what does that mean for us, living in a world where everyone is performing, persuading, pretending? It means we have two options: to be manipulated or to master perception consciously, to understand how emotion is engineered, and then decide what deserves our attention. Because attention, not morality, is the true currency of power, and those who spend it blindly lose themselves. But awareness, real awareness, isn't soft. It's not the glow of enlightenment people imagine, it's a blade. It cuts through illusions you once found comforting. It strips away the narratives that made you feel safe. The first thing you lose when you start seeing clearly is your innocence. And yet, what comes next is worth it, because once you strip away the theater, what remains is power in its purest form. The power to choose what to believe, what to serve, and who you become. That's what Machiavelli ultimately wanted people to grasp. Not cynicism for its own sake, but mastery of reality. He wasn't worshiping deception, he was describing it, exposing it, arming you against it. His message wasn't be cruel. It was see clearly enough that cruelty never blindsides you. Today's world is built on fog. Digital fog, emotional fog, moral fog. Everyone tells you what to feel, what to care about, what to fear. Algorithms shape your instincts before you even realize it. The crowd rages at shadows, loves ghosts, crowns illusion. And you, if you don't pause, if you don't train your sight, you get absorbed by it. But clarity is rebellion. To see through the machinery of manipulation is to take back your will. That's the real Machiavellian revolution. Not submission to darkness, but dominion over it. You start by observing. Every time a celebrity cries on camera, ask yourself, who benefits from this emotion? Every time a political figure promises redemption, ask, what power are they restoring? Every time the culture declares a new villain, ask, who gains control from the outrage? That habit of questioning turns your mind from audience to architect. You stop reacting, you start reading patterns. And once you read patterns, you can rewrite them. That's when manipulation loses its teeth. Because you can't be ruled by what you understand. The spell only works in darkness. Remember, Machiavelli said that fortune favors the bold, but he didn't mean reckless boldness. He meant conscious, disciplined daring, the kind that comes from knowing how the game works and playing it with your eyes open. And maybe that's the missing lesson of modern fame, the one hidden under all the noise. The celebrities who endure aren't necessarily the purest, but the most self-aware. They understand that fame is fickle, so they root their power in something deeper: strategy, purpose, adaptability. You can do the same on any scale. In relationships, in business, in your personal ambitions, the mechanics are identical. Influence isn't about pretending, it's about precision. It's about aligning perception with intent so cleanly that your presence carries weight even in silence. That's how the few guide the many through clarity. Not louder emotion, but colder vision. And when you cultivate that vision, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing to dominate others because you've mastered yourself. The manipulator seeks control because he fears chaos. The strategist understands chaos and moves within it. The first is addicted to outcomes. The second is loyal only to awareness. That's where power becomes peace. Because the truth is, the world will always have its performers, its politicians, its puppet masters. You can't erase manipulation, it's as old as language, but you can render it harmless by stepping outside its frame. When you no longer crave their validation, their tactics fail. When you no longer chase approval, their leverage dissolves. The manipulator depends on your reaction. Starve him of it, and he starves altogether. That's the paradox Machiavelli hinted at but never fully said. The ultimate form of control is self-control. To rule yourself is to become untouchable. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, you can engage the world on your own terms. You can use persuasion without losing integrity, influence without becoming hollow. Because now you're conscious of the exchange, you see the invisible contracts behind every interaction. This is where modern Machiavellianism transforms from manipulation into art, the art of intentional influence, the art of directing emotion toward purpose instead of exploitation, the art of using strategy to build rather than deceive. That's the real evolution of power, awareness with discipline, clarity with empathy. Imagine a leader who understands human nature deeply enough to predict its flaws, but cares enough to use that understanding for stability instead of domination. That's not fantasy, it's the logical next step in our evolution. The fusion of Machiavellian insight with moral intelligence. Because what good is cunning without conscience? What's strategy without soul? The future belongs to those who can see through illusion without becoming cynical, who can understand manipulation without becoming manipulator, those who can look directly at the machinery of fame, politics, and persuasion and say, I see you, but I choose something higher. And maybe that's the most revolutionary act in a world built on spectacle, to be sincere without being naive, to care consciously, to love strategically, to act with awareness. That's the new mastery. Not the brute force of old kings, not the deceit of clever courtiers, but the calm precision of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and why. You can feel the difference between someone who acts for validation and someone who acts from vision. The first exhausts you, the second stabilizes you. The first feeds on reaction, the second shapes direction. When you become that kind of person, rooted, perceptive, unprovoked, you become what Machiavelli called a prince among men. Not because you dominate others, but because you are immune to domination. Think of history's rarest figures, those who walked through chaos untouched. Marcus Aurelius writing wisdom in a war tent. Mandela walking out of prison without bitterness. They weren't perfect, but they saw clearly. They understood that control begins where reactivity ends, and in that stillness, they shaped nation. Now imagine bringing that same awareness into the micro-realms of daily life. When someone tries to guilt you, flatter you, provoke you, you watch, you note, you respond from intention instead of impulse. You don't suppress emotion, you command it. That's Machiavellian intelligence purified through consciousness. Because the real danger of manipulation isn't that others might deceive you, it's that you might never learn to see. And seeing is everything. When you truly see, you don't just understand power, you embody it, quietly, effortlessly. The world still spins, the dramas still unfold, but you stand centered, watching patterns instead of drowning in them. You start noticing how every empire, digital or political, rises on illusion and falls when the illusion breaks. You start seeing how fame feeds on fragility, how outrage fuels obedience, how even virtue can become a marketing strategy. And instead of being disgusted, you become deliberate. You start asking, how can I use what's real? How can I create value that doesn't depend on deception? That's when leadership stops being manipulation and becomes stewardship. You're not bending others to your will, you're aligning wills towards something meaningful. You're using the same psychological principles, not to exploit, but to awaken. Because the truth is, persuasion is neutral, power is neutral. The darkness or light comes from the intent behind it. Machiavelli saw human nature as it is. You get to decide what to do with that knowledge. You can weaponize it or you can wield it wisely. And wisdom is what the modern world is starving for. Not more noise, not more emotion, but lucidity, the ability to hold complexity without collapsing into cynicism. That's what the new princes of influence will embody. Not charm, not fame, but composure. The kind of composure that makes others feel clarity in your presence. You can build that. You don't need a throne or followers or algorithm. You just need awareness sharp enough to slice through illusion and integrity strong enough to hold what you find. Once you have that, you're free, not because the world stops manipulating, but because you stop submitting. And that freedom radiates. People feel it, they trust it, they align with it. That's how influence truly works, not through control, but through coherence. So the next time you scroll through the endless theater of fame, remember, every performance teaches you something about fear, about desire, about the human need to be seen. Learn from it, but don't bow to it. You're not the audience anymore. You're the observer, the strategist, the sovereign of your own perception. And when you live like that, when you move through the world awake, you turn the very tools of manipulation into instruments of awareness. You speak less but mean more. You act slower but strike deeper. You stop chasing crowns and start wearing them invisibly. That's the quiet power Machiavelli was pointing to all along. Not deceit, not dominance, mastery of mind. Because the ultimate insight hidden beneath every Machiavellian principle is this: the game only owns those who don't know they're playing. You know now, and that changes everything. You begin to realize that power at its core was never about domination. It was about direction, the quiet, deliberate steering of your own consciousness through a world built to distract it. That's the thing no one tells you. Every empire, every ideology, every glittering celebrity kingdom thrives on your divided attention. They win the moment you forget to look inward. They win when your emotions belong to them more than to yourself. But when you start to reclaim that attention, not in anger, not in withdrawal, but in still awareness, the game collapses. Because the one thing no manipulator can control is a mind that refuses to react on command. That's what Machiavelli's philosophy becomes when you strip away the cynicism, a training ground for perception, a way to see without flinching, a way to walk among illusions and remain unshaken. You start noticing how quickly chaos dissolves when you don't feed it, how lies crumble when you don't defend against them, how people reveal their motives when you simply listen without rushing to fill the silence. And in that stillness, a different kind of influence begins to form, not loud, not flashy, but magnetic. The kind that doesn't demand, it attracts. It doesn't chase, it anchors. That's the paradox. The less you seek control, the more control you possess. Because control born of force breeds resistance, but control born of clarity breeds trust. People feel when they're seen through manipulation. They also feel when they're seen through understanding. The first provokes armor, the second invites loyalty. And that's where the new kind of leadership begins. Not in deception, but in discernment. Not in posturing, but in precision. You don't have to be a celebrity, a ruler, or a politician to live this way. Every human interaction, every conversation, every negotiation, every argument is a chance to practice conscious influence. You learn to ask, what emotion is being sold here? What story am I being invited to believe? What outcome is this person afraid of? And once you see it, you don't need to attack or expose. You just choose your response from awareness instead of instinct. That's power, real power. The kind Machiavelli hinted at, but rarely described outright. The sovereignty of mind that makes you ungovernable from the outside. And it changes how you see everything. The celebrity no longer looks like a god, just a human being inside a machine of perception. The influencer's confession no longer feels intimate, just strategic vulnerability. The politician's speech no longer feels inspiring, just calibrated emotion. And yet, instead of cynicism, you feel calm, because now you know the pattern. You can watch without worship, observe without absorbing. You've stepped out of the illusion, and from that vantage point, something profound happens. You start to feel compassion, even for the manipulator. You see that they too are trapped, imprisoned by the images they built. They can't stop performing because their survival depends on it. Their identity has become a commodity. That's the silent tragedy of power. The moment it's rooted in perception, it begins to consume the person who wields it. But you can choose differently. You can use understanding as liberation, not as leverage. You can see through the fog without becoming fog yourself. You can move through a world of deception and still act with integrity, because your clarity no longer depends on anyone else's truth. That's what it means to be free in a Machiavellian world. Freedom isn't withdrawal. It's awareness combined with intention. It's knowing the rules of the game so completely that you can play without losing yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Machiavelli was pointing toward all along, not the triumph of manipulation, but the mastery of perception, the courage to see human nature honestly and still choose to build something higher from it. Because here's the quiet revelation that sits at the end of every power game. When you stop needing to appear powerful, you already are. The calm ruler, the unseen strategist, the self-directed soul. That's who survives every empire of illusion. So when the next wave of spectacle comes, when the world once again crowns a new idol, destroys another, and begs you to join the chorus, pause. Watch. Notice the choreography. See the strings. Then turn your focus inward. Decide what deserves your attention, your emotion, your energy. That single act of conscious direction is rebellion. It's how you step out of the noise without leaving the world. And in that silence, the silence of someone who sees, you'll find something rarer than fame, safer than approval, stronger than fear. Sovereignty, the kind that no headline, no trend, no manipulator can ever touch. You don't need the throne, you don't need the spotlight. You already carry the crown that matters, the crown of awareness. And the moment you wear it, quietly, the whole theater of power loses its hold. Because the final truth is this: perception shapes kingdoms, but consciousness builds empires that never fall.